Chapter 11. Fangs of Poison. Mr. Dime never slept soundly. His dreams kept him awake. Sometimes he dreamed of dying in a blaze of gunfire. Other nights he was chased by soldiers and rode his horse off a cliff. But he always woke up tossing and rolling on his bed just before he hit the ground. Tonight's dream was about the rattlesnake. Dime dreamed the snake slithered from the bag and crawled out of the hole. It slid through the gates of the fort and entered the barracks. As if it knew exactly where it was going, the snake came to Mr. Dime's bed. The 6-foot-long rattlesnake climbed up the log wall and hung himself over Dime's head. It opened its mouth and dangled its fangs. Closer and closer it moved to Mr. Dime's face. Finally, it reared back its head, ready to strike. "No!" Dime shouted, kicking his legs and rolling to the floor. When he realized it was just a bad dream, Dime stood up and looked around the barracks. No one heard him holler, but something was strange. "Where is that Fire-Eye boy?" he whispered to himself. Danny Blackgoat had already left for his visit with Jim Davis. His bed was empty. Mr. Dime smiled. "I'll have a gift for him when he comes back to bed," he said. Dime dressed in a hurry and slipped quietly out the door. He crept behind the building and ran to the back gate of the fort. There was no road leading from this gate, only a path winding to the mountains. On most evenings this gate was left unguarded. Dime circled the fort and dashed to the campfire grounds. Moving the rock from the hole, he picked up a small tree branch. He tapped the snake through the bag. The rattlesnake jerked and hissed, snapping its jaws and striking. Mr. Dime waited until the snake coiled into a circle, still in the bag. He grabbed the snake by the neck and held tight. The snake shook and wriggled, but Dime's grip was strong. When the snake relaxed, Dime tied a knot at the opening of the bag. Never loosening his grip on the rattlesnake's neck, he ran back to the barracks. He glanced through a window, making certain everyone was still sleeping. "Good," Dime said. "Fire-Eye's bed is still empty." He entered the barracks and hurried to Danny's bed. He untied the knot. Very carefully he tucked the bag under the covers of Danny's bed. The rattlesnake slithered from the bag and coiled into a circle, waiting. 10 minutes later, Danny returned from his visit with Jim Davis. Tired and sleepy, he crept across the floor to his bed. "Jim Davis is like my grandfather," he thought as he crawled into bed. "He is a wise old man." He smiled and whispered the closing words to his grandfather's prayer. "Nothing will change." Danny closed his eyes and was almost asleep when change came. He felt something move beneath the covers. Danny waited for a moment. What could that be? He asked himself. He reached for his ankles. Then he heard it. Danny threw back the covers in time to see the rattlesnake whip his head back and strike. He sank his fangs deep into Danny's leg just below the knee. "Ow!" Danny shouted. He grabbed the snake by the neck and yanked it from his calf. A sharp dagger of pain shot up his leg. Danny flung the snake across the room as he fell to the floor. "Hey, keep it quiet over there," a prisoner hollered. "What's that noise?" said another. "Hey, Fire-Eye's hurt," shouted another. Soon 20 prisoners surrounded Danny, who lay on the floor clutching his leg. "Looks like he's been bit by a rattlesnake. Somebody get the doctor." "Leave him alone," a loud voice boomed across the barracks. The prisoners turned to Mr. Dime. "He's better off dead," Dime said. "He ain't getting out of this fort alive anyway. That snake did us all a favor." The men looked at each other without speaking. Suddenly, without a word, a prisoner dashed out the door. In less than a minute he returned, but without the doctor. Instead, Jim Davis entered the barracks. "I heard the young man got snake bit," Davis said. "Where is he?" The men parted their circle and pointed to Danny, rocking back and forth and writhing in pain. Danny looked to his friend, pleading with his eyes. "Help me, please." Davis knelt beside him and pulled a hunting knife from his belt. He wiped the blade on his sleeve. "This will hurt, Danny," he said, "but I have to do it." Davis took the bottom of Danny's pants leg with both hands and ripped the cloth. "Looks mighty bad," a prisoner said, and the others took a step back. Danny's leg was red and swollen, twice its normal size. Danny took one look, closed his eyes, and clenched his teeth. "Lay back, son," said Davis. "You don't need to watch." Davis eased the point of the knife into the snake bite. He twisted it deeper, digging out the torn flesh. Danny moaned and his body shook. "Somebody hold him," Davis shouted. "Don't just stand there. Give me a hand. You want this boy to die?" No one moved. "Oh," said Davis, "I guess some of you do want him dead. Well, that is not happening. Not tonight." "I'll help," said an older prisoner. "He never did nothing to me." He knelt down and held Danny by the shoulders. The prisoners looked to Mr. Dime, and in that brief moment, Davis knew who had put the snake in Danny Blackgoat's bed. He also knew now was not the time to deal with Mr. Dime. With the wound clean, Danny's blood flowed freely, covering the floor in a warm red puddle. "Clean this up best you can," Davis said. The prisoner pulled the sheet from Danny's bed and dropped it to the floor, soaking up the blood. Davis leaned over Danny and put his mouth on the bleeding snake bite. He sucked the blood out until his mouth was full, then turned and spat on the sheet. For several minutes Davis sucked the poison from Danny's leg. When the sour taste of the poison was gone, he wiped his mouth and leaned back. "Tear some strips from the sheet," he said. "Tie the cloth tight around his leg, just above the snake bite. We have to stop the blood. Don't want him bleeding to death, do we?" he said, glancing over his shoulder at Mr. Dime. Dime met his look with a mean, cold stare. "Maybe I'll carry him to my place," Davis said. "I can keep a better eye on him." Davis rose to his feet and carefully lifted Danny. "Before I went to war, I had a grandson about this boy's age," Davis said to anybody listening. "I don't know where he is or what's happened to him, but I'm going to see that nothing happens to this young'un." On his way to the carpenter shop, Davis stopped by the officers' barracks. A guard sat in a chair by the door, nodding and snoring. "You awake?" Davis asked. The soldier jumped to his feet, knocking his rifle to the ground. "Yes, sir," he shouted, looking right and left, and trying to remember where he was and what he was doing. "Can I speak to the officer in charge of the prisoners?" asked Davis. Soon a young officer stepped to the door. "This young man, the one you call Fire-Eye, was bit by a rattlesnake," Davis said. "With your permission, sir, I'd like to take him to the carpenter shop. The doctor can see him there. He won't be a bother to anybody." "How did he get bit by a snake in the middle of the night?" the officer asked. "I don't know about that, sir," said Davis. "He was asleep in his bed when it happened." "All right," said the officer. "Yes, take him to your shop. I'll send the doctor by in the morning. Will he live till then?" "Yes, sir. I sucked the poison from the bite. He'll be all right." "Good," the officer said. "Then carry on." After Davis left, the prisoners huddled into small groups of close friends. They whispered about what had happened. Everyone knew who put the rattlesnake in Danny Blackgoat's bed, but their fears were not for Fire-Eye. "He'll do the same to us if we make him mad," said one prisoner. "Somebody ought to do something to him," said another. "None of us are safe. No telling how many times he's killed before." Mr. Dime walked from one group to the next, talking loud and slapping the men on their backs. "Well, that Fire-Eye got what's coming to him," he said to a group standing in a corner. The men nodded and tried to laugh, but they were too nervous to celebrate. "Too bad we don't have some whiskey," Dime said. "I feel like partying." "I'd feel a lot better if we knew where that rattlesnake was," replied a prisoner. Mr. Dime looked to the floor and said nothing. The barracks grew quiet. Someone had challenged Mr. Dime. "Maybe I'll find that snake," Dime said. "That's when you'll need to worry." 10 minutes later a soldier stepped to the door of the barracks. "All right, everyone back to sleep," he shouted to the prisoners. No one wanted to go to bed. The rattlesnake was still in the barracks, maybe hiding under someone else's sheets. "Move," said the soldier, "unless you want to start your workday now. We can bring lanterns and you'll work 20 hours today instead of 10. It's up to you." The prisoners shuffled to their beds. They flung back the sheets and lifted their pillows. Some knelt down and looked under their beds. They found no snake. After biting Danny, the rattlesnake had slithered through a crack in the floor.